Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Progressive American. I'm Connor, back with another morning podcast about the week's news from a progressive perspective. It is Saturday, March 20th, 2021. Today we have a wide array of news for you all, including the Democratic rejection of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, a plan to expel Marjorie Greene from the House of Representatives, and the tragic death and racism that occurred in Atlanta this week. There is also the issue of Steven Crowder's recent video discussing black farmers to address, but we will get to that soon. On Friday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was yet again accused of sexual misconduct, this time by a current aide in his own office. Alyssa McGrath, a current aide to the governor's office, laid out her allegations in multiple interviews with the New York Times' Jesse McKinley. McGrath's allegations come on the heel of numerous women accusing Cuomo of sexual harassment, unwanted kissing, and other such behavior. It also comes at a time when Democrats and Republicans in the New York State legislature are turning against the once-respected governor while impeachment investigations are being prepared. During her multiple interviews with the Times, McGrath described an atmosphere of consistent flirtation and unwanted commentary about women's appearances, including her own. In one instance, McGrath noted that Cuomo looked down her shirt and commented on a necklace that she was wearing without being prompted. McGrath also noted that another aide had been groped by Cuomo in the executive mansion. Specifically, McGrath explained that Cuomo had groped the unidentified aide's breast without her consent. Though McGrath explained that this aide detailed the event to her, she is not the first person to reference this event. The Albany Times-Union, a local newspaper in New York, first detailed the event last week, keeping the accusing woman's name secret to protect her from reprisal. Other women, such as Ann Rutch, who did not work for Cuomo, have also had their stories available for the public's consideration. Rutch accused Cuomo of making unwanted advances against her and taking hold of her face to kiss her at a wedding reception in 2019. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported and released a photo showing the alleged attempt at kissing. While everyone is innocent until proven guilty, I think we need to ask ourselves a few major questions. First, how much of this behavior are we willing to tolerate? Cuomo isn't just accused of being weird or looking at people. We have photo evidence of the man putting his hands on Ann Rutch's cheek, which, if you look at the photo, clearly terrified her. What is more likely, that a singular man in a position of power abused said power over the women he knew, or that a bunch of women, some of whom had no connection to each other, are all lying about Cuomo's conduct? Cuomo must resign, and if he doesn't, he should be impeached. That one picture alone shows that Cuomo tends to put his hands on women without their consent. And while I get that some people don't want to throw accusations around when it comes to something as serious as sexual harassment, it is worth noting that as a member of the government, Cuomo is not just some public figure. He is dependent upon some element of the public's trust to maintain his legitimacy. And when Cuomo or any other politician abuses that trust, they are no longer entitled to the power that they hold. Sexual harassment is a perfectly reasonable ground for removing anyone from power. Anything less is a failure of the public to hold its leaders accountable. People should not see this as some political ploy either. The entire point of the Me Too movement was to point out that this kind of unacceptable behavior is far too common and has to be stopped. If you condemn Trump for his behavior towards women, then it naturally extends that we also have to hold Cuomo accountable. We are not asking for him to go to jail, but I think it's pretty reasonable to say that a man with at least 6 women accusing him of sexual impropriety should not hold the reins of power. He can't be trusted with the public interest, and it's that simple. In other news, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the representative from the 14th Congressional District of Georgia, is facing a resolution of expulsion. California Democrat Representative Jimmy Gomez introduced a resolution of expulsion for the infamous congresswoman, although it is unclear when the resolution will be debated. Greene has been the subject of continuous and unending controversy. She is known for her support of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, QAnon, and 9/11 trutherism, but more than that, Greene also has a violent streak. In 2018, Greene posted comments on Facebook that seemingly supported the idea of hanging leading Democrats. In 2019, she liked posts suggesting that Speaker Nancy Pelosi should have, quote, a bullet to the head, end quote. She's also far from unwilling to throw mud at others either, calling David Hogg, a Parkland shooting survivor and activist, a, quote, little Hitler for his support of gun control. This controversial behavior is part of why she was removed from her committee seat on the Education, Labor, and Budget Committees in a bipartisan vote, with 11 Republicans voting in favor of her removal from these committees. That says something about the way she interacts with her fellow Republicans. However, unlike the previous votes against Greene, this vote requires a 2/3 majority in order to pass under the Constitution and would expel her from the House of Representatives, effectively kicking her out of Congress. And as nice as that sounds, this resolution is likely to fail. No Republicans currently support the vote, and it is unlikely that any of them will, as Republicans who supported removing Greene from her committee seats were themselves subject to backlash from within their own party. Still, Representative Gomez has made a point to emphasize the alleged danger that Greene poses, saying, quote, "I believe some of my Republican colleagues, and one in particular, wish harm upon this legislative body. I'm not saying this for shock value. It's the conclusion I drew after a member of Congress advocated violence against our peers, the Speaker, and our government. It's what I believed after this chamber was turned into a crime scene just 10 weeks ago." End quote. While I won't deny that Representative Greene is an atrocious excuse for a congresswoman and that the legislature would be better off without her, I've recently begun to reevaluate her role in politics. The main source of her power comes from her ability to spread lies and misinformation online. More than that, she's no longer connected to any major position beyond her seat in the House. She can call for motions to adjourn anytime she likes, but that has not been doing much for her lately. I will admit that I don't like Greene at all, but the more I look at her, the more I see someone who thrives on attention. If you think Greene's a threat to the public discourse, I agree with you 100%, but she's a threat online and only online. She's got none of the pragmatic political skills of any Republican before her. She's a floundering loudmouth who feeds on controversy. Put pressure to get her banned off social media if you think she's violent enough to merit it. But this vote will only waste time. Democrats need to focus on helping people, not making resolutions that unite the Republicans in opposition. Greene is only powerful through the attention she receives. If that changes, I will be the first to admit it. But right now, she's nothing more than a quack in a dysfunctional party. We should treat her as such. I will concede that my position on this has changed. Initially, I thought that if Greene were to be removed, which was always a dream, it would do the body politic some good. But the truth is that Greene only needs to be held accountable on online platforms to be stopped. On everything else, she is weak. She's not moving mountains, and she won't move anything above the political weight of a pebble. We don't have to engage with her. We just have to minimize her. With that out of the way, I'm afraid that we have to turn to the tragic shooting that occurred in Atlanta. On Tuesday, a man whom I will not be naming opened fire on 3 separate spas, killing 8 people, most of whom were Asian. Police say that the shooter admitted that he was attempting to remove what he called a temptation from his life, that temptation being the sex that he believed was associated with Asian spas. But I have to say that it is rather crude to ignore the implication of what this shooter said. Some are already arguing that this action is tied to sex addiction, and that may be true. But if there was a sex addiction involved, which again are the perpetrator's claims and nobody else's, the fact that he chose Asian spas to target for his murders speaks volumes about the sexism and racism evident in his actions. It is entirely unacceptable to suggest that the shooter's attitude towards sex is inherently separate from anti-Asian sentiments, especially when we don't even know if it's true or not that he had a sex addiction. Not only are Asian women consistently fetishized online, but even at the time before the shooting, there were concerns that anti-Asian violence could come out, especially after the previous president consistently used derisive rhetoric surrounding Asians in COVID-19. Hell, even one of the police officers who talked about the murders, Captain Jay Baker, treated it like it was a casual thing and had himself posted racist imagery about China and COVID-19. Still, there has been some action taken by leaders to address the possibility of anti-Asian sentiment. The Biden administration appears to believe, as I do, that the attacks were racially motivated, condemning anti-Asian hatred in a statement released on Friday.
Whatever the motivation, we know this. Too many Asian Americans have been walking up and down the streets and worrying, waking up each morning the past year feeling their safety and the safety of their loved ones are at stake. They've been attacked, blamed, scapegoated, and harassed.
These statements, while appropriate and necessary, don't bring the dead back. Again, I don't know if the shooter was motivated by racial animus, but the fact that he targeted only Asian spas and actively drove to these locations to target them says a lot about his motives. Considering the circumstances and the justifications that the shooter provided, I can't help but think that this was a racist attack, but I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong. I just wish we could bring those people back. They didn't deserve that. Nobody does. Turning to another example of racism, I regret that we have to talk about Steven Crowder. For those who don't know, Steven Crowder is a controversial conservative commentator on YouTube and a host for The Blaze, a media company run by Glenn Beck. Crowder describes himself as a comedian, but I don't see the appeal. Most of his content is dedicated to mocking liberals and leftists, sometimes needlessly intertwining the two as if they were the same. But at his core, he's a shock jockey. Recently, however, Crowder has dropped the veil of shock jockeyism and released a video in which he mocked black farmers with racist caricatures.
I don't know where you find this many farmers of color, but they did, and $5.2 billion are being allocated exclusively for colored farmers. Farmers of color, roll the tape.
We begin today's show looking at a major provision in President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that aims to address decades of discrimination against Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American farmers who've historically been excluded from government agricultural programs. The American Rescue Plan sets aside $10.4 billion for agriculture support and allocates about half the funds to farmers of color who are, quote, subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as members of a group, unquote. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights confirmed as long ago as 1965 the U.S. Department of Agriculture discriminated against black farmers, but little was done to address the problem. 100
years ago?
Yeah, most happy about the new policy, these people. So, yeah. I'm gonna buy a plow, man.
I'm gonna plant that corn.
Go get a John Deere. Barack Obama, mother, I'm the president of plowing that ass. You.
I thought the last thing they would want to do is be farmers. Wasn't that a big problem for hundreds of years?
Yeah.
Isn't that why Arsenio Hall called himself the urban man's Johnny Carson?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Are people lining up out in the middle of cornfield, Iowa for new dunks?
How would you prove this, by the way? Like, how would you prove that you've been discriminated
against? You
don't
have to. You just
Well, I didn't get that loan. Sir, you had no credit. Well, that should not have stopped me from getting the loan.
I planted a Hennessy tree, but it's not growing.
Well, technically it did grow, but that shit ain't XO.
I put it in the ground.
I planted a VSOP XO tree. I'm getting in some niche esoteric cognac humor, motherfucker.
Don't white people just go to their neighborhoods and build urban farms and ruin their communities? Isn't that
That's how it works?
In Detroit. Turns out the soil content, there's a high level of meth.
Yeah, crazy.
Whoa. Wow, I didn't know.
That and teeth.
There's
random teeth littered everywhere.
And by the way,
pain in my arugula.
I apologize for the long clip, but it is important to show how a discussion surrounding racial reconciliation via government support turned into a racist skit for Crowder to use for his audience. Now, Crowder eventually had his video taken down by YouTube, but it was not as a result of the racism that he helped perpetuate in it. Instead, YouTube took it down for COVID-19 misinformation that appeared during the video later on. In a statement to 1-0, YouTube stated that, quote, "We removed this video for violating our COVID-19 misinformation policy, which prohibits content claiming that the death rates of COVID-19 are less severe or equally as severe as the common cold or seasonal flu," end quote. When pressed by 1-0, YouTube spokesperson Ivy Choi explained that, quote, "Our hate speech policy prohibits content promoting hatred against groups based on their race. While offensive, this video from Steven Crowder does not violate this policy." Now, I don't know what would constitute racist content in YouTube's eyes, but when it comes to diatribes about black people planting Hennessy trees in meth-laced soil while having no credit, I'm pretty sure that what Crowder did qualifies as racist content. This is not the first time that Crowder has gotten into trouble for his prejudicial statements. In fact, he had been previously involved with a harassment campaign against Carlos Maza, a former writer and commentator for Vox who happened to be gay. He used numerous anti-gay slurs to refer to Maza and routinely mocked him on multiple episodes of his show. Now, I'm not going to rehash that fight. Instead, what I'm trying to point out is that Crowder is almost always at the center of some sort of prejudice controversy. It is his brand. Crowder has on multiple occasions either made stereotypical depictions of minorities, made racist imitations of minority groups, and in some cases been overtly bigoted against those groups. He made a video about indigenous scalping, portraying indigenous people as savages. He's dressed in traditional Asian garb while making a mocking accent of an Asian person, all while drowning a white, blonde female doll on set, and has made numerous other comments on his channel that would normally get smaller channels banned. And yet, Crowder is on his way to 5.4 million subscribers on YouTube, reaching a vast audience like no other YouTuber does. I mentioned in the previous story that racial connotations play a major role in how we think of other people, so I have to ask the question, how does what Steven Crowder does on a daily basis influence people online? Because from what I saw in Crowder's video, and what you heard in that audio, it seems to me like he's just perpetuating racism for profit to his audience. He can monetize his channel all he wants, have his co-stars make racist jokes about Hennessy trees and meth in the soil, and YouTube will let him do it without repercussions. If YouTube is genuine about ending racism online, perhaps they should start to act like it and ban Steven Crowder permanently. A platform that maintains white supremacist rhetoric and permits its continuation is not a platform built for everyone. It is a platform of bigotry. There can be no more hesitation on this. Ban the racists. Thank you everybody for joining me. That's it for today. I will be back next Saturday with a new podcast as always. You've been listening to The Progressive American. I'm Connor Kelly, signing off.